If you're a consumer of petroleum products in Ghana, then you may have noticed that the price of your product has inched up a little at the pumps. Now, that's because we've all been slapped by a 5% increase in all petroleum products in the country. And then we also hear that Tema Oil Refinery has posted profits for the first time in many years. Then we also hear that the FPSO at Tamils is coming on shore to start work at the 10 projects. Now, what meaning should we draw from all of this? What will be the benefits for the Ghanaian consumer? That is the focus of today's discussion here on Business Time. We'll also bring you some business news and then commodities and forex market. You're welcome to the program. My name is Kemini Amano. Don't go away. After years of serving you with the best in business and financial stories, Business and Financial Times comes to you 5 times in a week with the introduction of the Thursday edition. Your credible and trusted source of relevant business information will, from Monday to Friday, that is 5 times a week, continue to bring you all the information you need in business, the economy, real estate, maritime, sports and entertainment. Business and Financial Times, Africa's leading provider of credible business information. And we are back. Thank you very much for staying with us here on Business Time. My name is Kemini Amano. Don't forget that the program is brought to you in association with Ele Foods and Giant Malt, and it's powered by the Business and Financial Times newspaper, which you'll find on your newsstand throughout the week, which means that from Monday to Friday, you get the goodness of business news from the Business and Financial Times newspaper. Now let's check out news that made rounds in the world of business over the week. Rising costs of office space rental in major business districts in the capital have significantly increased the cost of doing business for medium to large-scale businesses, while some businesses are pushed to the brink. A decent office space in the Kotoka International Airport area is offered for rent at an average of $40 per square meter. On the Spintex Road, it would go for an average of $24 per square meter. In Osu, you'd find it around $20 per square meter, and similar for an office space in Tema. GOIL is raising 155 million cedis through a renounceable rights issue which began on May 3, 2016 and expected to end on the 18th of May 2016. GOIL hopes to use the proceeds to strengthen the company's balance sheets, expand current retail outlets, acquire a bitumen plant, as well as expand facilities at the Takoradi Harbour. Ghana is a good place to invest, but the country needs to deal decisively with the corruption that stands in the way of investors, particularly where people are asked to make unapproved payments. That's according to Christopher Thornley, Canadian High Commissioner to Ghana. In an interview with the BNFT, Mr. Thornley said that even though government has shown commitment in fighting corruption, there is still more to be done to eradicate what has become a national blight by strengthening institutions set up to regulate the behavior of people. Ghana Trade and Livelihood Coalition has indicated that Ghana has a huge potential to raise about $5 billion from agriculture and agribusiness by year 2030. This, according to the GTLC, will be possible if the government will make the necessary capital injection to transform the agriculture sector in the next 14 years. In this week's episode, we are back to the conversation around the oil and gas sector, mainly for 3 reasons. First, the 5% slapped on petroleum products, and then also would look at the Tema Oil Refinery, and then discuss the coming on shore of the FPSO, Professor John Evans at Mills. What are the benefits of this to us? And we look forward to a future. Can we look forward to a future where we don't have problems with petroleum products in the country anymore? We'll have this conversation with Chief Executive of the African Energy Consortium Limited, Mr. Kwame Jantuah. He's joined us here on the program. You're welcome to the program.
Thank you. And Good afternoon.
Absolutely. Let's start off with the 5% increase we've been slapped with as far as petroleum products at the pump is concerned. What do you think about this increase? Do you see it coming?
Well, it all depends on the increase of crude oil. That is what has caused this 5% increase. But oil prices are very volatile. A few months ago, it dropped to a certain level that Ghanaians were happy with, and now it is now starting to rise again. And so it all depends on that volatility we have in the oil prices.
From where you sit, is this the beginning for the recovery of the price of crude on the world markets?
Well, because of that volatility, you can't tell. Anything can happen in Russia, anything can happen in the United States, anything can happen in the world that can affect that price and can bring the price back down. You can never tell the volatility of the oil prices. And if there is a standard routine where oil is concerned and there's no big difference in terms of what is happening in different economies. Right now, if something happens in Iran today, it's going to affect the oil price. If something happens in Russia, it's going to affect the oil price. Those are major producers of oil. And, you know, that volatility is attached to most of the happenings in the economies of other countries. We don't tend to have...
I'm starting to fear as a consumer, because then I could, again, wake up tomorrow or whenever, and then I'll see fuel price go up again because of the situation with the world market prices. But for us...
But you can also find that the oil price might have come down also.
Would we experience it, especially with the deregulation and the new taxes?
You see, what some of us have said is that Africa is a strong oil producing continent. Why don't we have our own? Why don't we determine our prices? Why are prices tagged to, you know, Brent, tagged to the Americans, tagged to the Middle Eastern system? Why?
But how easy would it be for us?
Why wouldn't it be easy? We need to take. Recently, you heard of the BRICS countries. A certain number of countries have decided that they want their own economic power, and they've come together. Why can't we do it in Africa?
What would it take for us to price our own crude on the continent?
It would take trust. It would take belief that we would do it. It would take the heads of states of the different African countries to want to do it for the benefit of the people. Mostly it is trust. So we're having a similar situation where Ghana is getting gas from Nigeria. Are we getting it? That gas that isn't flowing through the West African gas pipeline, wouldn't you have thought that Nigeria being a big brother to us, it won't be something that where we should worry about? But look what happened in the last few months, where we went through this dumso for quite some time, not even months, for 3 years. And if gas was constantly flowing through the West African gas pipeline, wouldn't be in that situation. So we take commitment and trust from governments to be able to say that when you supply me, I'll also be able to pay you. When you supply, I'll be able to pay. So it all hinges on the economies of our different countries.
Won't that spark the situation where we'd have some of these huge oil companies say they don't want to do business with the countries on the continent anymore? For instance, Ghana is really proud that Puma Energy decided to step foot here. If we decided that we wanted to do this on our own, the possibility of these people not bringing in their investments could come up. Shouldn't we be worried about
ExxonMobil
that?
tried to come in here. What happened? Government didn't do business with them. Shell tried to come in, especially where oil is concerned. They didn't do business with them. You don't really need the big guys to come in. Who did we start with? We started with Tallow. We started with Cosmos. Who were Tallow and Cosmos before they started drilling oil and gas in Ghana? They're now a household name. And so we can do it within ourselves. What we need to do is to be able to build capacity. Be able to identify companies that are willing to build capacity within themselves to be able to go into the industry. Now, the unfortunate thing with Ghana is that we started back to front. It takes nearly 6 to 10 years to get to where Ghana is today. We did it in 3 years. And
is that a bad thing?
Yeah, well, that's 6 to 10 years. What do? You build your capacity within your companies. You build your regulations. You build your laws. So by the time you're starting to drill oil, everything is set.
Do you see us doing that?
Well, we started drilling oil first before putting everything in place. Yes, we had PNDC law 84, which governed the oil industry. We had PNDC law 64, which governed GMPC. But those laws weren't strong enough to be able to handle the oil industry. So what did we do? When Tallow and Cosmos decided that we can't wait for you, we brought our money, we brought our investment in, we are responsible to our shareholders, we are starting. We now hurriedly went to put up the revenue management law. Now, putting up the revenue management law, we didn't even put the EMP law in first, Exploration and Petroleum Law, which is the Bible of the industry. It is that law which the other laws come out from, which the revenue management law comes out from, the local content law comes out from, all the laws that govern the industry. But at the present moment, we're doing it back to front. We've got local content, we've got revenue management, but we do not have the EMP in place. And that can cause a huge challenge, because the EMP determines how a company comes in to drill oil in your country.
Let's come back to the 5%. For the consumer, well, it's going to be a really difficult time now doing your calculation. But what really went into the 5%?
Well, it's determined, I don't know how they calculated it, but it's determined by the drop and rise in the oil price, because refined petroleum products are taken out of crude oil. Now, there are two things that you need to be very mindful of: the growth in demand of a product, and then the price of a product. Now, let's situate that in the oil, the refined petrol and diesel. So there's a growth in demand, isn't there? There's a huge demand for refined petroleum products. The price has gone up, right? Now, who regulates the price? If it so happened that government regulated the price, government would be in a position now to decide, do we push that price onto the consumer, or do we absorb that price? Now, in government absorbing that price, what happens? There are certain social and economic things that they would have to cut to be able to absorb that. But we are on the other side of deregulation. And where deregulation is concerned, government is not wholly part and parcel of determining the price. The price is determined by market forces. The OMCs determine the price with guidance from NPA. And when that happens, two things happen. It's either competition or a cartel. If it's competition, then the petrol garages, the OMCs, will compete amongst themselves to get a price that would attract consumers to them. If it's a cartel, then they will come together and determine what price should be sold to the consumer. And that can be dangerous.
In our case, since we introduced deregulation, what do you see happening? Is it a fair competition, or we see a cartel?
Haven't we seen a drop in petroleum prices for quite some time?
Well, we were, and then the world market started going up.
So then that didn't come from the oil marketing, the OMCs. It didn't come from them. It was influenced by the rise in oil prices worldwide. So it wasn't something that they had generated in a cartelish way.
But the prices are not competitive enough. I mean, they almost...
In terms of...
At the pump.
Well, that shows...
They almost price the same.
Well, that shows you when you go to certain pumps, some are higher, slightly higher than others.
Is that not a sign of the cartel being formed? They come together and say, let's do it this way.
Well, that at the present moment, MPA, the regulator, will not allow that to happen.
How do we know that we could be allowing a cartel to form? How would we know?
It's very difficult to tell.
I'm thinking so.
It's only over a duration of time, when you look at how the prices are going, that you'll be able to tell there could be a bad fish in this thing.
Deregulation, was it a good thing for us, or?
I think it relieved government. It relieved government of the huge burden of trying to finance the BDCs and that kind of thing. So to some degree, it stabilized price. Look, petrol prices hasn't been high for the last how many months? It hasn't been high. Yes, it's been something that has been influenced by the drop in crude oil prices. But even I remember some time ago when the prices went slightly up, the petrol garages decided, no, we'll keep the price where it is. So deregulation to some degree is fine.
I see. We're talking the oil and gas sector with Chief Executive for the Africa Energy Consortium Limited. Discussions we've made about how Africa could sell its own oil to its own people, and that will help us better than dealing with the OPECs and the rest of the world. Now, the second part of the conversation would look at what role the FPSO, Professor John Evans Mills, would play, in all of this, and then also we'll look at the Tema oil refinery. What uses it right now? That would be one of the questions we would answer when we come back. Don't go away.
Suavemente, bésame, que quiero sentir tus labios besándome.
Giant Malt is a non-alcoholic beverage which contains minerals and vitamins that gives you energy and power to keep you moving. Giant Malt brings out the giant in you.
You're welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us here on Business Time. Our guest this week is Mr. Kwame Jantuah. He is Chief Executive for the Africa Energy Consortium Limited. We are discussing energy, petroleum products, the oil and gas sector, and I hope you stay on for the next few minutes of the conversation. Mr. Jantuah, so for me, FPSO, Professor John Evans Mills coming on shore, what would be, for me, the first thing that comes to mind is what would be the benefit at this point, in the life of the sale of crude on the world market? What will be its benefits to us as a country?
Let me define what an FPSO is in terms of what it means. It's a floating production, storage, offloading vessel. So it floats on the sea, it produces oil, and it stores and it offloads into a vessel. So in selling oil that has been drilled, a vessel or a tanker comes close to it, is offloaded into the tanker, and it is taken away to the market to sell. Some of us thought that with the current situation we find with FPSO Kwame Nkrumah, where the turret is not working, the turret is that equipment that balances the FPSO, we should also look at a mix of having rigs. Government has signed nearly 13 to 15 contracts within the activity map of oil and gas map of Ghana. And that activity map stretches from Axim to Keta. Now, when all these companies are producing oil, are all of them going to use FPSOs? Is it a safe thing for them to use? So some of us are saying that let's have rigs also, where we can also pipe oil onshore. When you pipe oil onshore, it creates employment, it creates certain infrastructure that also helps boost the economy. It makes it easier for us to now supply oil to Tema oil refinery.
So essentially, government is making the same mistake it made with the Jubilee field.
Well, whether it's a mistake is yet to be seen. But from what we've seen,
we've seen too many maintenance
from what we've
activities
seen
on that.
from FPSO Kwame Nkrumah, I think we start thinking about also having some rigs in place that we can use to drill. Because when you go to Norway, they have rigs interconnected to each other like a city. They also use FPSOs, but the rigs also play a good role. So in times when FPSOs aren't working, at least we know that when the two FPSOs are out of contention, going for maintenance, the rig is still there to drill oil and most importantly to supply gas to a trouble.
What does this mean for us as a people? We're getting more oil. Would it mean more money necessarily?
Depending on the oil price. You see, Ghana's oil is top grade refined oil. The Nigerians call it Bonny Light. I think we call ours Jubilee. I'm not sure of the name. But it's top grade. It's one of the top grade oil. And every refinery in the world wants that kind of crude oil because it's very easy to refine. You see, this is where the challenge comes, that if we are to export our oil, we could make more foreign exchange that way than to give it to our own refinery to refine for the people of Ghana. But who owns that commodity?
I was surprised to know that we haven't done that since exploration began in the country, where the Tema Oil Refinery did a job for us. But
exploration takes more than 5 years. We've only started oil production but we've done
it quickly.
We are babies.
We've done it quickly,
yeah,
and we started lifting oil.
It's only one field.
But
it's only one field.
All the same, we've lifted oil, but
yes.
The refinery hasn't done any refining for us as a people because we prefer to sell.
Well, it has done refining from other crude oil brought in to refine for Ghana, but not from our own crude oil.
Does it make sense to you, as you know, an energy consultant, an energy analyst? Does it make sense?
It depends on the figures. It depends if government feels that they'll make more money from selling the oil than giving it to Tema Oil Refinery. Hang on, and they can use part of that money to bring in cheap crude oil for Tema Oil Refinery to refine. Fine, why not?
Then it brings me to my question I asked before we went on the break. For me as a consumer and as a Ghanaian, then I ask, what use then is the Tema Oil Refinery, which we spend so much money on? What does it do really?
Well, Tema Oil Refinery has gotten to where it's gotten because of the politics we've played with it over the years. I believe Tema Oil Refinery has one of the best technicians and engineers in there, but we've used it to a certain limit, that the debts of Tema Oil Refinery were so high. Now, Tema Oil Refinery today, when you read the papers today, it says it's made profit. It's made profit because Tema Oil Refinery aren't the ones buying the crude. Our challenges came with the crude that we were buying. And at the present moment, Bost is the one that is supplying Tema Oil Refinery the crude to refine for them. So they're acting as a tolling refinery, which is good.
So now we are charging to refine because they are not buying their own crude to refine and then sell off.
Well, Bost is a Ghanaian company.
Yeah.
Bulk oil
storage and transportation.
Yes. Now they are buying the crude for them to refine, which is a good thing. They've made profit of $800,000. They are looking to make profit next time about 1 million. It is good for the workers of Bost. It is good for the country. If through that we can now expand Tema Oil Refinery, whereby other West African countries who also have oil can decide to bring their oil for Tema Oil Refinery to refine, it's all well and good for Ghanaians.
So for you, governments, whichever administration is in place, should always be objective when it comes to whether or not we should refine our own crude.
Well, it depends on the price. Right now, if the oil price falls to $20 a barrel, it will be very difficult for us to make too much money out of it. And if Tema Oil Refinery is there, why don't we refine for Ghanaians?
So objectivity is key there.
Yes, it's key.
Let's wrap it up.
And timing is also key.
Okay.
Yes.
Let's wrap it up with this. How do we make sure that TOR does not end up in wallowing in debt like it did a few years ago after the recovery?
They should first of all have a strategic plan, which is key. They should secondly look at their cost and their expenditure. Now that they are not having to find money to bring crude oil in, that cost and expenditure should be controlled. Even if they are not making profit and they are breaking even, it's worth it. Now, they've come from a place where they made so much bad blood with regards to being able to run TOR. They've been able to jump out of that. I hope they can stay there. But it's got to also do with politicians not getting involved in the management of TOR. That has been one great bane that we've had where TOR is concerned. But I'm not saying that the politics and the government in power should not be able to supervise how TOR is going. It is being able to make sure that politics does not sieve too much into the affairs of toll that makes it redundant in what they are supposed to do.
Mr. Jantuah, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
I've been talking to Mr. Kwame Jantuah. He's Chief Executive for the Africa Energy Consortium Limited. We've had a pleasant discussion around the oil and gas sector. We've looked at petroleum products, whether or not what we are receiving at the pump is the best price possible for the consumer here in the country. We've talked about the FPSO at our mills. We've also discussed the possibilities and the benefits that will come with introducing rigs at our various fields, oil fields in the country. We've also looked at Tema Oil Refinery. I'm very passionate about that. We've paid the debt. We don't want it to go back there. And now we know how it can prevent itself from getting to that ditch it fell in some years ago. Still to come, we'll look at the commodities and forex activities that took place over the week. Do stay.
Suavemente, bésame, que quiero sentir tus labios besándome.
Giant malt is a non-alcoholic beverage which contains minerals and vitamins that gives you energy and power to keep you moving. Giant malt brings out the giant in you.
Well, there you have it. Those were activities that went on the commodities and forex market over the week. I hope you pick your pointers for all your touch points for next week to be able to play it free and fair on the forex market especially. And then also you know what to do with the commodities market. But that'll be all for our program today. Thank you very much for staying with us throughout the half hour of business time. The program is brought to you in association with Lady Foods and Giant Malt and definitely powered by the Business and Financial Times newspaper. My name is Kemini Amano. Goodbye.